Hello, internet humans. I feel like I start every video off like that, but you never know who's gonna watch things. Um, so I'm recording this on June 27th. Tomorrow is my 25th birthday, and I have been very excited about this birthday for quite a while. Um, and a lot of people are like, "You're just turning 25. It's not that big a deal," but it's a big deal for me because tomorrow I turn 25, and 10 years ago I wanted to die. So I had thought about different ways of starting this video, of kind of, starting it off on a super positive, things get better, and they do. But the reality of why this birthday is so important to me is because 10 years ago, I didn't think I would ever make it to my 25th birthday. For the record, I'm not making this video for like a pity me or whatever. I'm making it because I'm damn proud of myself, and I want to share that because I'm not one to boast about myself, but I'm proud that I'm still here because there are so many times that my brain has told me I shouldn't be. So when I was 15, I was in a really bad relationship. It was very unhealthy, kind of emotionally abusive. And it was my second actual relationship. It lasted all of 3 months, and it ended up affecting me for about a year and a half, which I don't know if that's typical teenage drama fashion or what, but that's what happened. So this person that I was dating was older than me, was 2 years ahead of me in school, went to a different school, so I didn't see them all the time. And for some reason, and I don't know why, if it's just I have a susceptible personality or what, but I let this person tell me who I was. They needed to know where I was all the time. They needed to know what I was doing. If I didn't text back within however many minutes, they got mad. And of course, I didn't identify it as such at the time, but looking back, it was definitely manipulative. And so this person told me who I was, and I was scared of him. I wasn't sure if he would physically hurt me. I was afraid that he might. There were times when we'd be, making out or whatever, and he would definitely use his strength against me, and that made me worry if he did that for fun, what would he do if he was upset? And I knew enough at that point to know that that wasn't something I wanted to find out. And so I butt dialed him. I was with a friend, and we called him and put the phone between us on speakerphone, and I unloaded on her all of the things that I had hated about the relationship that I was in because I was afraid to say it to his face. And of course, he heard everything, and I pulled an oh oops and hung up after. I was 15. It was ridiculous. I was 14 at the time. But yeah, so we broke up, and he broke up with me, of course. And at first I was really, really relieved to be kind of out from under his thumb. But again, at the time, I wasn't identifying it as a manipulative, abusive relationship because I was 15 and I didn't know any better, and I was headstrong and didn't listen to any of the people in my life that told me that he was terrible and that I shouldn't be with him. But I remember very clearly that day, I had my phone in my pocket or whatever, went to get dinner with my dad and my brother, and my phone was blowing up with calls, with text messages, and I wasn't answering any of them because I was scared. Again, I didn't want to know what he was going to say. Luckily we were both young, so neither of us could drive, so I didn't have to worry about him coming to my house. Plus my dad hated him, so that wouldn't have gone too well. But once I got home and was listening to everything and reading everything, I believed every word that he said. He said I was worthless, I was horrible, no one else is going to want to be with me ever. The typical, things that people say when they're emotionally abusive and don't have control of their person anymore. They become aggressive and want to tell you how they're the best thing that ever happened to you. And because my identity was so wrapped up in this person, and because he told me who I was, when he told me that I was worthless, there was no part of my brain at the time that said, you're not worthless. He doesn't know what he's talking about. My brain was telling me, he's right. You're worthless. No one's ever going to want to be with you. You're horrible. You're all these things that he had said. And I became numb. I use the analogy of The Giver a lot, because in The Giver, the book or the movie, whichever, everything starts in black and white. And as the movie progresses, Jonas, the main character, starts to see color. And the first color that he sees is red. And he starts to learn how much color actually exists in the world and how much it's drained from the society that he lives in. So I talk about my world looking like The Giver, but in reverse. So everything used to be really colorful, and I would hear music everywhere. And I don't know if it was slow or if it was all at once, but I kind of just realized I was seeing everything in black and white. There was no color in my life. I wasn't enjoying the things that I would normally enjoy. I was hearing noise where I used to hear music. I slowly became not me. I've always prided myself on being, like a happy, positive person. But in that instance, I was not that. And so I started sneaking out. I started doing risky things, nothing illegal, I don't think. But I just wanted to feel something. I was extremely numb, and breaking rules was the only thing that made me feel anything, because that's not who I was. I didn't break rules. I was a goody two-shoes, always home by curfew. If I wasn't going to be, I let my parents know, got their approval, all of that. I wasn't a bad kid, but doing bad things was making me feel something other than numb. And my parents found out what I'd been doing. I later found out that my brother ratted me out, which I really appreciate, because I think he saw that I was not okay. But we didn't have the kind of relationship where he could talk to me about it. So I was essentially put on house arrest. I could go to church, I could go to school, and Job's Daughters, which was a religious-y thing that I was part of, choir practice, that was it. I had internet access for 2 hours a day, 6 to 8 p.m. My phone only worked for 2 hours a day, 6 to 8 p.m. So if I was texted or called outside of that window, I never saw it. And I didn't have a smartphone, so it was my little, I think I had like an LG Octane or something. It was a flip phone with a QWERTY keyboard. I felt really cool. It was summertime by the time that this happened. And so I wasn't seeing my friends at school. I wasn't going to choir practice. So it pretty much just turned into I went to church or I was at home. And when you're in a state where your internal monologue is saying nothing except you're worthless, you're horrible, you don't deserve to live, when that's all that you hear, you start to believe it. I definitely started to believe it. And there was one point when I was under my house arrest, as I call it, that I decided that self-harm would be a good idea. So I self-harmed. It left a scar where I could see it. And I eventually had lied to my parents about where I was going. I left my phone where I was supposed to be because they were tracking my phone. I left my phone where I was supposed to be and went and hung out with my ex, my manipulative, abusive ex. And I had later texted him a picture of my arm, which is where I self-harmed. And I said, essentially, like, I did this because of you or whatever. And he called me a psycho bitch. And I think that was the last time I talked to him. So that's how that ended. But I just remember either sitting in my room, doing nothing, watching TV and not really paying attention. I did a lot of reading. But mostly I sat on the floor and I cried. And my parents, looking back on it, were terrified. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I was doing. My behavior did not line up with who I was as a person, and they didn't know what to do with that information. And I don't fault them for anything. I don't fault my parents for anything in my life. They did the best they could with what they had at the time. With parenting, you figure it out as you go and you hope you're doing okay. Like there's no rule book of how to handle everything. As a result of that, I felt ashamed of being in my own house. I felt like I didn't deserve to be there because I had disappointed my parents so much. But I also didn't have anywhere to go. So the thing that kept popping into my mind was, well, why don't you just kill yourself? That'll solve everyone's problems. No one will care if you're gone. That's fine. You can just go. That's not a big deal. And so that was my internal monologue for probably about a month and a half. I would wake up crying, upset that I was alive. I would go to bed crying, hoping that I would die in my sleep. It was horrible. It was not a fun time of my life. But I don't know if it was God in the back of my head. I don't know if it was my own stubbornness that didn't lead me to do anything to end my own life. But one day, it started to get a little bit better. Wasn't great, but started to get better. I started to see color again. I fought like hell to get color back. I fought like hell to get music back. And eventually crawled out of it. So that was the first time that I wanted to die. I feel like I should insert a "but wait, there's more" thing here. 3 years later, I was 18. I was in another not super healthy relationship. I was away at college my freshman year, 460 some miles from home. I lived in a single, so I was by myself. I didn't have a lot of friends because I didn't drink. And the person that I was in a relationship with he'd been checked out for months, and I knew it, but I was clinging to something that was no longer serving me or serving him. And eventually he broke up with me. And again, totally fair. We ended up getting back together and breaking up a couple more times. And then I went crazy ex-girlfriend and called him like 50 times because I just wanted him to hear me, and he wasn't. And it was not a proud moment for me. But when I was 18 and he broke up with me, it was over Skype, which I applaud him for not doing it over text because that's also happened to me. But via phone is better, or Skype, whatever. And I, all of a sudden, felt like I was dying. I couldn't breathe. I was dizzy. I was shaking. My heart was pounding. I literally thought that I was about to keel over and die. And I was in a room by myself because I was in a single. Didn't have a roommate. Didn't have a lot of friends. The one friend that I really had that I could count on was across campus and was notoriously terrible at responding to texts. She still is. But it felt like it lasted forever. And afterwards, I called my mom and I said, I feel like I almost died. And I was telling her what I was feeling. I told her that I'd been broken up with. And she said, I think you just had a panic attack. And I was like, that's what that was? Because I felt like I was literally about to die. And luckily that time I didn't throw up, because sometimes I do. But from that point on, for probably the next year or so, I had a panic attack probably once a week. And my everyday anxiety, I call it. Free floating, I think is the psychological term. My everyday anxiety kind of just picked up, and I started to have more compulsions. I've always had a thing about shoelaces and counting and eating, and things need to be even or in multiples of 5 or in prime numbers. It's not logical. But those things started to get worse. And my depression also came back. And also, none of this had been officially diagnosed. I hadn't really opened up to my parents about it. I hadn't opened up to a lot of people about it because I have mental illness in my family, and always felt like I was going to be the one that made it out. I thought I was going to be the one that was going to be fine. Fine. There is no fine. I thought I was going to be the one to turn out quote unquote normal, or neurotypical is the correct way to say it. And the fact that that's not what was happening, and that wasn't the way that my life was panning out. I felt crazy. I felt like everything about me was wrong. I was angry, and I'm an angry crier, and I was already crying a lot. So there were so many tears when I was 18. I just was so disappointed in myself. And I felt like it was my fault because I wasn't opening up to people. I wasn't telling people what was going on. So no one was telling me your feelings are valid. You're allowed to feel what you feel. Even if your thoughts aren't rational, that doesn't mean they're not real. I didn't have that. I didn't allow that, I should say. I didn't give people the chance to do that for me. I was very selfish in my mental illness. I was, I'm going to be in my dark hole all by myself. No one can come in. And that happens a lot. A lot of people are like that. It's normal to want to protect those around you. It was a weird dichotomy because it was don't tell anyone, but also no one cares, was what my brain was telling me, which doesn't make sense because I should have told people and people did care. But my brain wasn't letting me hear that, wasn't letting me feel the truth. So that was when anxiety came in and OCD as well. And after like a year and a half, I was fine again. And, I kept thinking that these ebbs and flows were kind of normal and everyone goes through it and whatever. I didn't need to talk about it. And once I got past it, I pretended like it never happened. I didn't talk about it. I didn't bring it up. I didn't say, hey, remember when I had a panic attack and I had to lay on the floor in your dorm room and have you tell me you're not dying? I didn't bring that up because I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I experienced that. I was ashamed that I wasn't strong enough to deal with the emotions that I was feeling. I was ashamed that I let my heart lead instead of logic. But eventually, again, came out of it, stopped talking about it, thought that was that. Then my senior year of college, when I was 21, I had a really bad work situation. I was a resident advisor. I was in a really toxic environment with the residents that I was overseeing. Was not a healthy environment for me. And it was, instead of my own internal monologue telling me, you're worthless, no one wants you here, I was hearing that from residents. There are a lot of circumstances that have to do with why things were that way. But again, I started to believe them. And my schoolwork was suffering. I got a C on an assignment I easily could have gotten an A on. And I didn't care. And that was what snapped me out of the daze that I had been in. I don't think I realized that I was neglecting my school. I wasn't Didn't realize that I was neglecting myself, didn't realize that I was being extremely irritable with people around me, and that's why people were reacting the way they were. I didn't realize that it was me. I was putting it on everyone else. It was everyone else's problem, and I was just the victim, which is not accurate. And I started to have panic attacks again, and started to have really bad daily anxiety. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating very much. I lost a fair amount of weight. I was not in a good place, and I thought that my job was the reason. And so I quit my job. I moved off campus into an apartment, and it didn't really get better. I thought that that would solve all my problems, because again, I thought it was, a one-off experience. I didn't see the pattern. I thought, oh, if I just get off campus, if I get out of this job, I'll be fine. And then I wasn't. At that point, I wasn't dealing so much with depression, more anxiety. So just learning how to manage that and cope with that, not necessarily in the healthiest of ways, but at that point I was in survival mode. I wasn't in thrive mode. And that was that. So after I graduated, I turned 22 and finally went to see a psychiatrist. And happens to be a psychiatrist that my family knows. And so I got there, I talked with her, did all the paperwork to fill out like the diagnoses and stuff like that. And finally, the statistic is it usually takes about 10 years between first onset of symptoms to diagnosis with mental illness. And I had self-diagnosed with, depression and anxiety, talked about them like I knew everything about them. But I was finally officially diagnosed when I was 22 with anxiety, depression, and OCD. So it was a weird feeling because, again, I was upset that I wasn't neurotypical. I was upset that I didn't make it out unscathed or whatever, because there's, a hereditary component to mental illness. And at the same time, I was extremely relieved because I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. Someone looked at my symptoms and said, yes, you have this, and it's most likely caused by a chemical imbalance in your brain that you can do nothing about. Well, not nothing. There's medication, cognitive behavioral therapy, and all that. But it was such a weird, good feeling to know that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. It wasn't all in my head. I mean, it's in my brain, but, And at that time, I started medication. The first medication that I tried was not in agreement with me. I lost a lot of weight. I was really tired all the time. It wasn't helping my symptoms very much. So we switched to something else, and that worked. That's what I've been on since. It's been about 3 years. But at that point, my psychiatrist and I were talking, and she also referred me to a therapist, a psychologist, that I started seeing and I still see. And we talked about how my depression is likely cyclical. So there are those ebbs and flows, and my cycle just happens to be 3 years. So it makes sense looking back 15, 18, 21. So I was expecting to have a depressive episode sometime in the year of when I was 24. So then there was that to look forward to. Therapy went well, has been going well. I love my therapist. My psychiatrist is great, always backs me up and is a partner in my treatment. And I also recognize that I am extremely privileged to have that access. I know that there are so many people that don't have access to quality mental health care, that don't have access to mental health care at all. I recognize that I am extremely lucky to have been born into the family that I was born into, and I'm extremely lucky to have had a job that provided health insurance and be able to pay out of pocket when I needed to. But as I was creeping along, I didn't know where to go next. I felt kind of stuck. I felt like I was just waiting for my 24th year for depression to rear its ugly head again and make my life miserable. And I was scared. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to have to deal with it. And luckily, I had a friend who had heard some of my story and the way that I articulated things about how depression felt for me. And he told me that I should write a book about my life story. I figured I'm not doing much else. Why not? So when I was 23, I started writing my book. I had a goal. By my 25th birthday, I will be done writing this book. I'll be up to date. I'll be finished. I'll have some philosophical, overarching ending that's, super encouraging so that people don't get so depressed with the way of my life. Depressed is a poor choice of words, so that people don't get brought down by reading about some of the things that have happened in my life. And then a pandemic happened, and a civil rights movement kicked up, and life happened. And I started forgetting about the book. I started forgetting that my goal was that even if depression kicked my ass when I was 24, I was going to use it for something. I was going to get something out of it. And at the end of 2019, I met my current boyfriend, whose shared apartment I'm in. We moved in together yesterday, and the book started to fade a bit. I don't think I've touched it in 4 or 5 months, because I think the book was the thing giving me purpose. I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to help someone else realize that they weren't alone. And I think in the process of wanting to use my own pain to help other people, I wasn't validating the pain that I felt, because I was just taking it and seeing what I could get out of it. I wasn't sitting with it. I wasn't feeling it. I put it on the back burner, and that's okay. I missed my goal. I've written about 30,000 words. I'm not going to finish it by tomorrow. I'm, I think, a year and a half behind current times. But I'm happy. And there was a time where if I set a long arching goal, I would beat myself up to no end if I missed it or didn't reach it. And again, I'm making this video because I'm proud of myself. I'm not making it for pity. I'm not making it for a pat on the back. I'm making it for proof that it gets better. It got better for me. Assuming nothing catastrophic happens between today and tomorrow, I made it through my 24th year without an episode of depression. I broke the cycle. And I didn't think I was going to cry. And I'm extremely happy that 10 years ago I wanted to die, and now I want to live. And I want everyone to know that you deserve to live. The world is better because you are in it. I'm here if you need someone to talk to. I've had people reach out over the years because I seem like a good person to talk to. I'm not judgmental. I'm not an I told you so person. And also, if I had killed myself when I was 15, when I wanted to die, there's so many things that I would have missed. I wouldn't have graduated high school. I wouldn't have graduated college. I wouldn't have started and dropped out of a master's program. I wouldn't have been there for my best friend when she was broken up with from her first relationship and didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do. I wouldn't have gotten to meet my tiny humans that I babysit. I wouldn't have gotten to see my brother graduate college. I wouldn't have bought my first car. I wouldn't have moved out of my parents' house. I wouldn't have become independent. I wouldn't have gotten my own health insurance, wouldn't have gotten my own car insurance, which was out of necessity because I crashed a car. But I wouldn't have learned how to use my pain. I wouldn't have learned how to use my experiences. I wouldn't have learned how to make the world better because of what I went through. I would have been another statistic. I would have been another person killed by mental illness. I would have lost so many opportunities. And there are days that are hard. There have been times where I've felt like I'm slipping back into depression. And the difference now is that I trust myself enough to know what that looks like. And I have people around me that know when I'm not okay. And I've built that circle. It's been hard. I've had to stop being friends with people that don't care about me as a person, that only keep me around because I give them something or they can get emotional labor out of me. It sounds selfish, but there's a saying of self-care isn't selfish. And I think now the reason that I'm so vocal is I love the phrase, be who you needed when you were younger. And when I was younger, I didn't have a me. I wish I had a me, but I didn't. And so I want to be the kind of a person that would have pulled me out of that a little faster. It would have helped me reach out. So if you're struggling, reach out. I promise you, someone cares. I care. I might not know you. I might not have ever met you. I might not ever meet you, but I care. I want you here. The world is better because you are in it. And things will get better, and you need to be here to see that happen, because I stuck around and it happened. Because 10 years ago I wanted to die, and tomorrow I turn 25, and I could not be more excited to keep living. So thanks for listening. I'm here if you need me. Things do get better. And just a couple of things. COVID-19 is real. Please wear a mask. Black lives matter. Trans lives matter. Be here to see things get better.